Hello, and welcome back to Horrific Tales. Before we begin, can I just ask that you like and share these videos and help get exposure for artists who very kindly contribute to the show. Today's episode is an excerpt from The Vampyres of Montevideo, a collection of short horror stories. It's my pleasure to bring you The Rocker, written by Gloria Hobson. As soon as she saw the rocking chair in the dealer's window, Rhoda Mason knew she had to have it. It was just perfect, exactly what she had been looking for since she moved into her small cottage in the Welsh countryside. Despite its apparent age, it looked very sturdy, made from highly polished hardwood with a beautifully carved back with such fine detail it almost looked like lace. Impatiently, she went inside to ask the price. To her surprise, it was a lot less than what she had expected. The man explained he wanted to make space for new stock. He seemed almost relieved to get rid of it. He would deliver it the next day. Hurrying home, she immediately moved things around to accommodate her new acquisition. She wanted it near to the fire and in front of the window. She moved the small table next to it. To complete the look, picked some fresh flowers from the tiny garden to set on it. Perfect! Promptly at 10 the next morning, the chair was delivered and put in place. A large flowered cushion made it look very homely, and she sank down onto it with a contented sigh. Rocking gently, she called for her large tabby cat, Cleo, to sit on her lap. But one look at the rocker, and she hissed loudly and ran away. Never mind, she would soon get used to it. After 10 minutes, Rhoda suddenly felt very nauseous and lightheaded, and she went to the kitchen for a glass of water. She remembered that she hadn't had any breakfast that morning. A slice of toast would put things right. She soon felt better, and, as it was quite a pleasant day, she went out into the garden to prepare the small vegetable patch she was hoping to cultivate. It had been a big step for her to move from the large industrial town in the north to this small village deep in the forested heart of mid-Wales. But early retirement from the bank and a decent pension meant she could finally realise her dream of a cottage in the country. She loved the quietness, solitude and beautiful views from her window, and she was truly content. After tea, she went back into the small sitting room, picked up a newspaper and settled into her new rocker. The fire was glowing faintly and the sun was starting to set. She put her head back and dozed lightly, wondering vaguely where Cleo could be. Suddenly, Rhoda sat bolt upright, as what felt like an electric shock passed through her. Almost falling off the chair, she jumped up and looked around her. It was almost dark, and she looked out of the window. She was startled to see two large yellow eyes staring at her. "Cleo!" she called and opened the window. The cat jumped through, carefully avoiding the chair. "Come on, let's have an early night. I don't feel very well." And she went upstairs, and, undressing quickly, crawled into bed with Cleo across her feet. She slept fitfully, the night interspersed with strange dreams, and she awoke with a thumping headache and double vision. Downstairs, Rhoda thought back to when she first felt unwell, and she glanced suspiciously at the chair. What could it be? Perhaps it had been treated with some chemicals to prevent woodworm, or maybe a strong varnish had been used. Yes, that must be it. She walked across the room to examine it, but she couldn't smell anything strange, just the faint aroma of beeswax polish. Rhoda peered at the intricate carvings on the back. They seemed full of strange symbols with curlics, and with sudden inspiration she reached for a notepad and copied them as best she could. After breakfast she would catch a bus to the nearest town, where she knew there was a good antiquarian bookshop on the high street. Perhaps she could find a book which might explain their meaning. By 10:30 she was in the shop, searching amongst the dusty bookshelves. There were quite a few books on Masonic symbols and Egyptian hieroglyphics. Not quite what she was looking for. She was about to give up, when tucked away at the rear was a book called Ancient Rituals and Symbols of Satanic Origins. She flicked through the pages, and turned to the chapter called Signs of the Beast, and her heart almost stopped. There, in front of her, was a symbol that looked very familiar. Taking out the piece of paper from her pocket, she held it against the page. Realizing that she had drawn it upside down, she turned it around to see that it was exactly the same. What she had taken for elaborate carvings were in fact the numbers 666. She knew their significance, of course. She remembered them from her Sunday school days. Something to do with the devil. She shuddered and felt quite cold, even though it was very stuffy in the shop. Paying the owner, she hurried out for the bus home. Rhoda sat at the kitchen table with a steaming cup of hot chocolate, with the book in front of her, willing herself to open it. Though it was only 3 o'clock, it was already getting dark, and a light rain pattered against the window. She turned to the page with the illustrations and read the text at the side. 666 is considered by some to be the mark of the beast or the devil. See Revelations chapter 13, verse 18. And is sometimes used to invoke his presence. To treat it lightly can have more dangerous consequences. The beast will wreak vengeance on all those who mock his name. She had read enough. The chair would have to go. A sudden flash of lightning lit up the darkening skies, and thunder tumbled across the nearby hills. The light flickered and went out, and the house suddenly became very gloomy. Searching under the sink, Rhoda found a torch and some candles. Not much, but it would have to do. Pulling her cardigan around her thin shoulders, she opened the back door and called for Cleo. There was no sign of her. She was probably sheltering in the garden shed. A noise from the living room caught her attention, and she strode nervously across and opened the door quietly, torch in hand. The chair was rocking gently, in what seemed to be like a misty haze. She shook her head and tried to move back, but her feet were frozen to the ground. Then the torch tumbled from her hand, plunging the room into semi-darkness. A low moan escaped from her lips as her terror increased, and a vague outline seemed to shimmer on the chair. A figure sat there, but it was too indistinct to tell who or what it was. The rocking became faster and faster, creaking loudly on the polished wood floor, and Rhoda thought she would surely lose her mind. Then the rocking stopped, and a loud clap of thunder almost deafened her. A dark form rose from the chair, and it turned to face her, the putrid stench overwhelming her nostrils. The face was like nothing she could ever have imagined in her worst nightmares. Dark features, but with eyes that glowed like red-hot coals, a scarlet slash for a mouth, with a black tongue lolling out, green spittle drooling from the chin. He moved towards her, seeming almost to float, and he held out his arms to embrace her, his long curled talons digging into her back as he held her close. The room began to swim, and her senses finally left her as she sank unconscious onto the floor. Something was licking her face, and her eyes flickered open. It was Cleo leaning over her, purring loudly, her fishy breath making her retch. She sat up shivering and glancing around her. It was daylight. She must have lain there all night. She looked across to the corner. The rocker sat there, seemingly perfectly innocent. What had happened last night? Was it a dream? Rhoda wasn't sure. Had she passed out? She struggled to her feet and approached the chair. As she leaned over to touch it, a faint tingle ran up her arm, and when she looked down, she could see 2 deep grooves in the floor, as though someone heavy had been rocking violently. Her blood ran cold. She knew what must be done. She approached the rocker. It looked completely harmless as she dragged it outside, hesitating for a moment, but then she remembered last night and was convinced she was doing the right thing. Within half an hour, the pieces were piled up on the empty vegetable patch. Some paraffin was sprinkled over it, and a lit match sent flames high into the air. Rhoda watched for some minutes until the heat drove her back inside, and a strange smell of sulphur filled the air. Closing the door, she bent to stroke Cleo. "Come on, old girl, let's get you something to eat," she said, and they went back inside. Behind her, in the depths of the fire, a low cackle could be heard, and 2 deep red coals burned menacingly in her direction. Well, we hope that you enjoyed our latest horrific tale. If you want to keep up to date with future episodes, then subscribe to our YouTube channel and like or follow our social media pages. You can also give the channel support by visiting our merchandise store and picking up some of our items. Please also take a moment to support our contributing artists who very kindly lend their talents to the show. Check out the links in the description on how you can do this. Well, that just leaves me to say, until next time my friends, keep it creepy, keep it horrific.